Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Blue Outpost Texas Democrats show. It's Mike Collier here. I'm going to kick things off. I've done a number of these. I missed the last one because I was in my pickup truck rounding up votes in West Texas and East Texas for Joe Biden. It went very well. I'm very, very encouraged. There's a lot more votes out in rural Texas for Joe Biden and all the candidates. We've got great candidates out there as well. A lot more votes than I think anybody knows, because of what we are faced with in our political lives. And so this is a terrifying time. It's an exciting time. It's a thrilling time. The most important thing is that we are fighting this fight together. And I can tell you that, having just been running around the state, hanging out with wonderful people, why would anybody not want to be a Democrat? I mean, it's just a wonderful experience. And that's why you're here tonight. And maybe there's some folks that are listening who don't think of themselves quite yet as Democrats. If that's you, welcome. I think what you're going to find when you hear the folks here tonight is that we're just your neighbor, we're your friend. Some people say I'm your crazy uncle. And all we want to do is make sure that our society works, and that we live in a just society, and that we can live up to the expectations, the very high expectations that were set many years ago by our founders. The expression that I always love is that shining city on a hill. Sometimes in our national life, we aspire to that. And sometimes we get close, and sometimes it seems like we don't have a prayer. And for the last several months, all of us have felt like, will we ever feel that optimism again? Will we ever feel like our nation can be that bright, shining city on a hill? And I think that we're on the very cusp of saying yes. And I'm just so proud of Joe Biden, who I'm working for as a senior advisor here in Texas. But it's not just Joe, it's all Democrats. But we saw what happened with President Trump, and he got sick, and we don't want him to be ill. We don't want our president to be sick. But we saw what Joe Biden did, and all the other Democrats. It didn't go negative, didn't say bad things, didn't slander him, no bullying, no junkyard bad stuff. We flew on a higher plane. And I think people noticed that. I know I was in West Texas when the news came down, and I've talked to many of my Republican friends since then. And what people are saying is, you guys are good guys, and Joe Biden is a terrific guy, which is precisely why he did that. And people notice that. And that's one of the reasons why I'm very encouraged about what's going to happen in 28 days, not just for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, but for all the Democrats and Democrats right here in Texas. And of course, we're not here to talk about national politics. We're here to talk about the very important work here in our state. And I will say this about the Biden campaign: they know how important it is that the down ballot candidates be successful. And so do you, so do I, which is why we're here. So we have a wonderful candidate, a good friend of mine, Dr. Carolyn Salter. She'll be introduced properly when we get into it with the moderators, but I'm just delighted that she's here on the show tonight. And as always, I'm delighted to be with you. So before we get into it, let's look at our sponsors and thank them. I'll read them off. Our sponsors: the 312th Family District Court Judge Clinton Chip Wells, 270th Civil District Court Judge Deidre Davis. Club sponsors: Bayou Blue Democrats, Maryland Area Democrats, Texas Democratic Women Harris County Chapter, Houston Stonewall Young Democrats, Southwest Democrats, Cy-Fair Area Democrats, Humble Area Democrats, Democratic Club of the Woodlands, Energy and Environmental Democrats. By the way, we talked an awful lot about energy out in West Texas. Climate change is real, and I carried that message out there. And we talked about renewables, and they get it too. That's a conversation for another day. Road Women, Cypress Tomball Democrats, Kingwood Area Democrats, that's where I am. Spring Democratic Club. Thank you to the club sponsors. Royal sponsors: former county clerk Dr. Diane Troutman. Thank you, Diane, good friend of mine. Carl Jones. Thank you, Carl, another good friend of mine. And the Humble Area Democrats President John Cotter. John, I've been accused of mispronouncing your name, and I think on the 6th try I got it. John, it's always good to see you, and thanks for all you do. Sapphire sponsors: Texas Senate District 3 Committeewoman Shirley Layton. She's everywhere as I zoom around. Shirley, thank you. Texas Senate District 7 Democrats, Attorney Mark Whitehead. Thank you, Mark. And then organizational sponsors: Powered by People, Harris County Democratic Party, Flip the Texas House, Sisters United Alliance, Swing Left Texas, Indivisible Houston, Blue Action Democrats. So why don't we get started in this most important work of our lifetime? And I just want to say one last thing. When I went into East and West Texas, I had to immerse myself in what some people consider to be Republican territory. I don't really believe that to be the case. There are Democrats everywhere. And what I learned is when you're in their company and you say, well, I'm a Democrat, you don't say, well, I'm a Democrat, but you must understand, or, well, I'm a Democrat, but you see. No, no, no. You hold your head high. It works like a charm. I'm a Democrat. Why aren't you? That's the way we played it. And we got a lot of people's heads spinning out in East and West Texas. So anyway, this is a great evening. And why don't we now cut over to our moderators, my good friends, Jamie Rodriguez and Carly Mosier.
He always does that. He knows it's Jaime. That's okay, though.
Did I say Jamie? Did I say Jamie?
You said Jamie. I know. You're reading.
I suppose I'm getting tired.
I'm just laughing. Mike lives about a mile away from me here in Kingwood. So, the funny thing is, you're talking about East Texas. I was born and raised in Nacogdoches, deep East Texas, the oldest town in Texas. I grew up. My congressman was Charlie Wilson growing up. If ever there was a Democrat, that was Charlie Wilson. And It's sad to see, that the craziness that's there right now. Louis Gohmert, the Republican, is the congressman in that area now. But slowly but surely, we'll change those tides. And tonight we're going to focus on East Texas, but we're really focusing on the rural areas, which is what you're talking about exactly, Mike, right? I mean, this is where the Republicans have been beating us as Democrats in Texas, these rural areas. We just seem to want to cede those areas to the Republicans. Why is that, Mike?
Well, I think for a long time, you didn't have quality candidates like we have now. I mean, you're not going to win if you don't run. I mean, if you don't have good people running, you're not going to win. And then the other side decides who we are, and they label us, and those labels stick. And that's a big part of it. So, I mean, there's nothing more important, and we're going to hear from a great East Texas candidate today, nothing more important than having strong, good people, smart people, accomplished people, serious people turn up and run as Democrats. And that's what's happening this election cycle.
So, Carly, why don't you introduce us to that serious candidate we're going to talk to tonight?
Well, I am very, very, very thrilled to introduce to everyone running for Texas 05, Dr. Carolyn Salter.
Hello. How are you?
We're great. How are you, Dr. Salter?
Well, I'm so thrilled to be here. I'm grateful for the invitation, and I always like to get together, whether in real time or by virtual meetings, other Democrats, because we get so much strength from being together and having fellowship like this.
That's right.
And it sounds like y'all are actually going to meet in real life on Saturday, Mike and Carolyn.
Oh yeah, we're co-conspirators. We're co-conspirators. Right. We're going to head off to Canton, Texas, to a candidate forum. So yeah, absolutely. Carolyn, you know more about than I do.
Well, it's gonna happen on the fairgrounds parking lot off 64 in Canton, Texas. It's not First Monday weekend, and it's a drive-in forum. We already have 14 candidates committed. We invited all the partisan races that are statewide or above, statewide or federal. So we have 14 committed. We invited all the Republicans, but and the Libertarians, and so far only the Libertarians are showing up. The Republicans have not agreed to come. And I was going around knocking on TV station doors today, trying to get somebody there. I didn't have the good success that Mike did in West Texas, but I did my best. We'll see if we can get somebody to show up and put it on TV.
And Mike, you're getting ready to start a big weekend and a big push to the end here. Tell us about it.
Well, what I decided to do, my offer to the Biden campaign, and they took me up on my offers to see if I couldn't spend my time in parts of the state where I did pretty well in 2018, East and West Texas. And of course, we've been working very hard on this for many months. And I felt like when we got to about 2 weeks before early voting, then what you have to do is get up on TV. And how do you do that? You get in your truck. And so I took a flyer. I got in my truck on Sunday morning. I stopped off and visited my mom and dad outside of Austin. It was good to see them. We sit outside on the back porch. And then I drove up to Amarillo and got on TV, and went down to Lubbock and got on TV, and then went down to Midland, San Angelo, Wichita Falls. Yesterday I was in Tyler, and we've had terrific success. I think I've made it on the evening news in all the stations in all these places. and being able to say, look, Joe Biden's a good man, and he stands in the right place on policy. The Democrats are always in the right place on policy, and so this is really wonderful. I have more work to do, more work in East Texas, but we're going to go to Canton, and that's going to be a lot of fun.
And then Sunday night, right here, we're going to feature you, Mike, for the whole hour and a half, and you're going to give us the scoop on Biden's everything. What does he believe, so that we know what we're talking about when we're talking on his behalf. You're going to tell us some strategy maybe behind the Biden campaign in Texas, all the ins and outs, eh? You give us the secrets.
Well, I'd love to, and not to toot my own horn, but I do want to say this. I got started in this in 2013. And I just ain't stopped. And, we got whooped in 2014, but all that did was just make me angry. And so I've worn out 3 pickup trucks, basically. And so what I really look forward to talking about is, why have we improved so much? And why is it that this race is going to be the culmination of what Democrats around the state have done so effectively to finally win statewide? And just kind of what it looks like from somebody who saw it all unfold from the driver's seat of his pickup truck.
So, audience, that's your teaser. I don't want to take up all of today's show on that, because that's going to be Sunday night's show. And with that, Mike, we'll let you go on. I know that you're extremely busy and you're doing great things for Texas and for America.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Jaime. Thank you, Jaime. I still can't believe I called you Jay.
We cannot wait to see you on Sunday, but stay safe on the roads, mask up, stay COVID-free. We need your voice.
Thank you, Carly.
We'll see you on Sunday.
We'll see you on Saturday. Looking forward to it.
See you then. 1 to 3, Canton, Texas.
Yep.
Perfect.
That's funny. I love that.
Walter, we are so glad that you joined us today. We are more than excited. We've seen your videos about mask life hacks and all these wonderful things. But before we get to all of our wonderful questions to you from not only us, but our audience, we wanted to give you a minute to introduce yourself. So if you would like to introduce yourself and talk about your district and what you're running for, go for it. You have at it.
I will. Well, I'm Dr. Carolyn Salter. I'm a physician. I graduated from UT Southwestern, and I'm running for Congressional District 5. 50% of the district is in Southeast Dallas, Mesquite, a little bit of Garland, Balk Springs, Seagoville. That's where 50% of the population is. And then the rest of the district goes for 120 miles all the way through East Texas, over to Cherokee County and Jacksonville, through Palestine and the whole county, Athens, the whole county, Kaufman, the whole county. That's Terrell is one of the big cities there, and Kaufman itself, Van Zandt County, and half of Wood. So it's a really long county, and it's really important in Houston. And I just want to thank the Blue Outpost Texas for having me today, and tell you that my district is the headwaters, or a lot of the Trinity River water source, and you get 86% of your drinking water from the Trinity River down there in Houston. I just want to point that out. So y'all in East Texas, the water is everything. And so we got to take care of our water by being environmentally sound, and that's one of my platforms. I was also the mayor of Palestine for 4 years, 2005 to 2009. And I'm a small business owner. My husband and I operate a medical clinic. I'm actually an anesthesiologist by training. He's an internist, but I do general practice. He does internal medicine. And we have 14 employees, and we've run that practice for nearly 30 years. So I'm a small business owner, I'm a physician, and I'm a former mayor. And my platform is affordable, accessible healthcare, accessible, affordable, very high quality broadband, high quality public education, no vouchers, and addressing climate change right now. We needed to do it yesterday, as well as supporting local business owners, not big corporate welfare. We need to support the people who operate businesses in our local communities. And I'm very distressed about the fact that Trump is not going to pursue any more relief for small business owners. So that's kind of me in a nutshell.
That's perfect. What a great introduction. We're so happy to have you. I think Jaime is going to give us the rundown of what we're going to do tonight, so you know just what to expect.
I'm gonna give you the basic format for what's gonna happen. We start off with a little lightning round, just 1 or 2 word answers to these lightning round. It's just so that the audience can get to know you quickly. Some of the lightning round questions you may have touched on right now in your opening statement anyway. We're going to go through them real fast. And then we're going to go through a real madcap assortment of questions that could be themes of the day. It could be philosophical questions. We're just going to get an assortment in since it's just you tonight. We're going to have more of a conversation. We usually try to limit these answers to about 1 minute. So what I'll do is I've got a stopwatch. I'll let it go for a minute. If we go over a little bit, no big deal. But if you kind of start to see my hand go up like that, just kind of try to wrap up whatever you're talking about. And that way we can get to as many questions as possible tonight. At some point close to the end of the first hour, what we're going to do is give you another minute to really expand on a central question about your district and the population of your district. So we'll let you do that one last time at the end of this hour. But then at 8 o'clock, we're going to open up this format to the audience, and they're going to be asking you questions. So all along this hour, people will be submitting questions on Facebook. And audience, that's your assignment, of course. I know that you might be watching it on YouTube or on Twitter. If at all possible, go to the Facebook page, which is Blue Outpost TX Democrats. Blue Outpost TX Democrats. Go there and go to the actual live show there and post your questions. We have people in the background that are curating those questions. They'll be sending them to Carly and I, and then we'll ask Carolyn those questions from 8 to 8:30. And so we'll try to limit those to 30-second answers. And those we will try to be a little bit more strict about, just so that we can get as many audience questions in as possible. So if you're good with the format, we'll start with a lightning round, and Carly, we'll let you take it away.
So, Dr. Salter, our lightning round questions are very quick and easy, 1 or 2 word answers only necessary. How long have you lived in your district? Well, I'm sorry. The first question we always ask, who is your opponent?
Lance Gooden, Republican, Trump lover.
Okay, and how long have you lived in your district?
Since 1991.
Oh, wow. Okay. And have you ever run for this position before?
No.
Okay, so next spring, you're going to be the winner of the congressional campaign, and President Joe Biden's going to come visit you. Where do you take him for lunch in your congressional district? And you've got such a wide spread. You've got rural, you've got urban. Where's the one place you take him for lunch?
Well, I would probably take him to Switch. It's a local pizza place, and I'm friends with the owner, and it's very popular.
That's awesome.
In Palestine there, or where?
In Palestine, yeah, in Palestine.
Okay.
Very good, very good. And Dr. Salter, who is your political hero?
Geez, there are so many. Katie Porter right now is my favorite, I think, for right now. But there are Ann Richards. I've always admired her. So you can't go wrong picking Ann.
Cannot go wrong picking Ann Richards in Texas. Never. That's correct. Even Republicans love Ann Richards.
So you're a doctor, and you're the kind that's an actual scientist that actually believes in science, not like some of these Republican doctors who don't seem to for some weird reason. But one of the things
that's for sure.
So one of the things we like to ask all Democrats is, what are they reading right now? What is something that you might recommend that our audience should be reading right now?
Well, I just read a little book that a friend gave me, and it was RBG Wisdom, Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Wow.
Quotes. It wasn't very long. It only took about 20 minutes to read, but it was worth doing. I mean, it really was inspiring. I was going, she's so right about everything. She should have been president.
She probably should have been, but she was smart enough to know that.
I think she was perfect where she was.
Yes, absolutely. She was one of the best arguers in front of a court ever. Just the most inspiring woman. And I do like some of her quotes that she's had about like marriage, because I'm married. And she says, just be selective in your hearing sometimes. That's one of her quotes, which is something I think about all the time. Like, yeah, that doesn't matter. It's not a big thing. So
right. It pays to be a little deaf, I think is how she put it.
Yes, that's right. That's right, Dr. Soldier. That's right. Okay, so we finished our lightning round questions. We want to remind our audience at home, thank you for joining us. We want to say thank you. It's important and imperative, obviously, to vote. Early voting in Texas starts on Monday. Early voting in Texas. Find your polling place and your location, especially in, I'm not particularly familiar with Texas 05 in terms of what counties that encompasses and where you need to go. So if you are a voter for Dr. Salter, make sure that you find the correct place to go to vote, and vote early and vote healthy. Wear your mask. Make sure that you stay COVID free. We want you all healthy and safe. And please make sure to go to the Facebook page, Blue Outpost TX Democrats, and ask your questions so that we can ask Dr. Salter the questions from her potential constituents. So now we're going to move on to our next round, and I think Jaime's going to start us off.
Yeah, so the first question that we have been asking every candidate, and it's only the first question because it polls the highest. It's the question that everybody is tuned in to listen for, and there are a lot of offshoots from this question that we can go to. It's really appropriate because of your profession. How it's going to be in healthcare, and so the way that we like to ask that question is, how do you provide the most health care for the most people given our resources?
Well, in Texas, that's a pretty easy answer. You expand Medicaid. So, that's the short answer. I've been doing a series of issues on healthcare on Friday at 1:30 on my Facebook Live. And it's really, really complicated. But if you just did one thing, expanding Medicaid in Texas would be it.
Well, so you have a little bit of time left on that question. Tell us, are you one of these people that's in favor of, let's say, Medicaid for all, healthcare for all, universal coverage? Is there a set of words that you like to advocate for? Are you with Joe Biden's version of the plan? I mean, where are you at when it comes to?
I'm probably closer to Joe Biden's version of the plan than anything, but I don't think that, I think employer-based healthcare is a failed system. It's failed us in COVID-19. It's never going to be it's never going to be successful in a pandemic situation or any sort of situation where large percentages of the population are out of work, or their work is threatened or limited. Because, if you don't work 30 hours a week, you technically don't have to be given health care coverage.
Right.
And if everybody else gets it in the corporation, then you're supposed to get it too, unless you work less than 30 hours. So I think we need it's really a hard question to answer, because we have the VA system, which is totally socialist, right? That's
right.
The veterans go there. They have limited copays based on their service connection, and everybody is employed by the government, and everything is paid for by the government. Mm-hmm. Now, that's not true of Medicare. Medicare is an insurance system, and increasingly it has been corporatized. Mm-hmm. So the Part C plans are their insurance companies. And they combine A, B, and D of the Medicare spectrum of coverage. Everybody gets A. You have to buy into B and D, which is A is hospital, B is physician, D is drugs, C is all of it together, and it's basically a capitated system where the Medicare pays insurance corporations, and I don't think it's working particularly well. Frankly, I don't like to see advantage plans in my practice, because they're really for-profit entities, and part of the way they make their profits is clawing back or denying services. Right. So I'm not really a fan of that, but I think we're going to have to think outside the box and reinvent our healthcare system.
Yeah, and oftentimes, if you don't have a job, or if you don't have a 40-hour work week, or you have been laid off, then you are encouraged to buy into COBRA. And COBRA oftentimes is more expensive because you have less income coming in. So you have, $2,000 a month for your COBRA care for you and your family. And that's unsustainable for so many families, especially right now. And especially such a wide-ranging loss of income for so many Americans, especially in Texas. It's something that's really important, and I really appreciate that you appreciate that as a physician, because oftentimes I think people wonder if physicians are part of that system. You know what I mean? Like, are they buying into that privatized for-profit healthcare system? And so often I see, especially Democrats that are also physicians, they don't buy into that. Is not what they think. They think everyone should have a right to healthcare in general, because it makes for a better society. If we all have preventative healthcare, then we all can work harder and create a society that we all believe in. So I really appreciate your answer to that. Jaime, do you want me to continue and ask another question?
Sure. Go ahead.
Well, one of the questions that we've been asking that I'm curious on your take as a physician is what you think a real gun policy would be, reform or otherwise. What you think a true gun policy would look like here that would make a difference.
Well, I am a gun owner. In fact, I bought a weapon like 5 or 6 months ago, and I had to go through a background check before I could walk out of the store with it. So when the Republicans say you don't have to have a background check, I don't know what they're talking about, because I had to have.
I think they generally talk about.
Now, I'm actually
gun show loopholes. I think the gun show loopholes are.
Loopholes. Well, I totally am opposed to gun show loopholes. It's not actually an endorsement, but I agree with the platform for Moms for Gun Sense. So basically, background checks, no loopholes, safe storage, and you need to have adequate training. And right. And very few people need to have fully automatic weapons, as far as I'm concerned. I don't know why anyone would need that. Even for shooting hogs, you don't really have to have that. You have to have a higher powered rifle, but you don't have to have a machine gun. So machine guns are for war. And as far as I know, we don't have any war here. At least, I hope we don't have any war in the near future. So those Moms for Gun Sense guidelines, I can totally get behind those. And I don't think nobody's going to, in East Texas, everybody's got a gun, and if you try to take, Democrats' gun, they're not going to want that either. It's not just the Republicans. And I think I heard somebody talk about, well, who doesn't have the guns? The Democrats. I go, oh, wrong. We'll return fire. So, and that's East Texas. So, there needs to be a common sense thing. The other thing to remember about the NRA, which is pushing all this, is it gets a ton of its money from gun manufacturers. And a lot of that is all about removing liability from them. And they've had funding from the Soviet Union or Russia. So I'm not sure I think a lot of this is just to sow division. It's not actually to take guns away from people. It's just to cause a ruckus and divide us nationally. That's what I think. I think it's a diversion.
It's funny. So people that are not aware of the geography of the state, I said earlier that I was born and raised in Nacogdoches. That's just a few miles away from Palestine, where Carolyn is. And I grew up, Democratic fundraisers were skeet shoots. I mean, that was normal, and we never thought twice about it. And we were talking about, safety and gun sense, sensible things. And that seems like the way that we ought to be talking anyway, but especially in these rural areas, the kind of the focus of tonight, Carolyn, is to hear how a rural Democrat is talking about these issues, because you're talking to, the red meat of Texas. And we Democrats so often just scoff at that part of the state, but that's where we keep losing, because we don't want to just have a real conversation. And you're telling us that you can have these conversations, and that Democrats might actually sound more Republican to some urban Democrats if they sat down and thought about it. But it's not that they're Republican at all. We want safety, we want sense, things like that, especially on issues like gun control. The old joke in the political circles, and it's a often repeated joke, and I know it's a cliche, but they say, of course we're in favor of gun control, because without gun control, how are you going to aim?
I mean, East Texas, you can't win statewide unless you win East Texas.
That's right.
And until the DC politicians figure that out, and the eastern part of Houston's part of East Texas. Mm-hmm. So, I consider everything, to the east of I-45 to be in East Texas, all the way down to the coast. And I went to school at Stephen F. Austin. So I lived for 3 years in Nacogdoches. So I know exactly where you came from. But we have to be able to talk to each other and reach across the aisle. And you just can't reach across the aisle just to poke the other guy's eye out. You need to extend a hand. And but the other side has to be willing to take it too.
That's true.
And that's been a big problem. They've just gone, oh, the Democrats won't work with us. Well, they said that as they were walking out of the room. So that's really not fair.
One of my favorite fundraisers, just to tag on to what Jaime was saying, was in a barn on a farm, and it was right when the Dixie Chicks were starting up. Like, it was one of their first big major events. And we talked about shooting, and we talked about everything that what I imagine my northern brothers and sisters would be just shocked about, the things that we talk about down here as Democrats, because we come from a different kind of culture, and we do have to adapt to that. And so I appreciate that we get to hear from a Democrat who's lived it and who has run and won as a mayor of Palestine. I just think that is a super important perspective. So I'm loving this conversation so far. Jaime, go on to our next question.
Well, I do think that when you have weapons, you have a responsibility to handle them safely. That means store them safely, keep them away from children, ensure they're not stolen and used in crimes. So that means safe storage. All those things go to responsible gun ownership. And that's not the same thing as taking your damn guns away.
And I brought this point up too. I would like the digitization of all of the NRA records. So anything that we have, everything is kept on record by hand still, which is crazy to me in this time of technological enhancement for everything, including what we're doing right now. I think that we could keep better records, and we would be able to find criminals and stolen weapons easier. So I appreciate that. Jaime, I'm sorry to keep interrupting.
Of course, keeping them on paper records is on purpose.
Yes.
It's not an accident. Absolutely. It's on purpose.
Well, some of y'all who are of a certain age might remember that movie Red Dawn that came out in the early 80s. And one of the famous scenes of that movie was when the Cubans and the Russians went into the records of the government office, and they looked through for all the gun owners. Mm-hmm. And that was one of those scare tactics in the movie to say, oh, we have the registrations of all the gun owners, and they rounded them all up and put them in a prison, outside. I think that a movie like that really scared up a lot of this notion that, if we keep records and things like that of people, that's exactly what's going to happen. We're going to get invaded, and all the gun owners are going to get rounded up and thrown in some kind of a prison.
That's true.
Well, you don't think Amazon and Walmart have records of you buying ammunition in their computers?
Fair.
I mean, all you have to do is look at your cell phone when you walk in Walmart.
That is just not that hard to figure out. You don't have to look at a gun record, of who owns what. You can tell what people do and what they care about and what they're up to by their Amazon cart.
That's true. That's absolutely true. We use data for everything. So why in the world wouldn't we want to make it? And we know that responsible gun owners, we know Republicans and Democrats that are responsible gun owners, they want all of these things. And you're right. It's just like voter suppression. It's just a tactic. It's just a tactic to get what they want, and not a tactic to protect all of us at large.
So I let us ramble a little bit because it's kind of fun. But for purpose of full disclosure, I need to tell the audience that I'm a political consultant by trade. I have been involved in CD5 before. I've known Carolyn before, And so I really know this district backwards and forwards, the eastern part of Dallas part, all the rural counties and all that. This is a fun topic. And when I suggested to our group, Blue Outpost Texas, that we have Carolyn on, it was specifically because of this. We would be able to talk about rural issues in a way that's deep and meaningful. And so to that end, I know that we could go on endlessly about one of these topics, but let's try to get several more topics in tonight. So I'm gonna switch gears a little bit, if you don't mind. And I just want to ask you, as a candidate, a kind of a philosophical question. And so this one, it comes up a lot. What is the role of money in politics, and what should the role of money in politics be? You're going up against a big machine. The guy is on Air Force One, it seems, every other week. He was a state house guy before he ran for Congress, and he had the backing of one of the wealthiest people in Texas, a hotelier from Dallas, who really funded his congressional campaign to the tune of a lot of money that probably didn't get disclosed correctly. How are you finding going up against a behemoth like that? Never mind the fact that you're in a red meat area. What is the role of money?
Well, I mean, money, if politics is a battle and you're using bullets, bucks are the bullets of politics. And that's just all there is to it. Until we get publicly funded races, money's, especially dark money, is going to be really important. And that's PAC money that doesn't have to be disclosed, that you can't coordinate with a candidate, supposedly. That's illegal. But certainly that happens. Most of my opponents' funding comes from big PACs, from big ag and big chemical corporations. And Monty Bennett, the hotelier you were talking about, when Lance was in the House, he managed to get all his Republican colleagues to make Monty Bennett's ranch into a water district, so that Tarrant County had to route their pipeline from Richland Chambers around it over to Fort Worth, to Tarrant County. Yeah, so he didn't want that going across his land. So, and they were even in cahoots a little bit, owning like an acre of land and then dissolving that ownership somehow. Dan Woods, the candidate that ran before, I met Jaime at my house in Palestine when I gave a fundraiser for Dan. And the reason I'm running this race is because Dan wanted to run for Court of Criminal Appeals. He didn't want to run for this race, and he asked me to run. And I'd always wanted to, so I didn't think too long about it really. But that is what Lance Gooden is known for in his housework. He's done 0 bills in Congress. No bipartisanship. Basically, he's a Trump, what I like to call a Trump humper, or a Trump jumper. You could say that. That's a little bit nicer. So when Trump tells him to jump, he asks how high on the way up. He is completely and totally partisan, and he even voted against a bill that was basically a resolution sanctioning doing hysterectomies on women without consent, and he voted against that. So That's the kind of guy Lance Gooden is.
That's crazy to me. She is clearly
so when they do that kind of stuff, they don't want you to think about that, because it'd make your head explode, right? I'm doing favors, huge favors for big donors, and getting all my Republican friends to help me. So your head would explode at the use of taxpayer dollars. Think how much more Tarrant County had to spend to route that water line around. So what do? They talk about other stuff like guns and abortions and everything else you can think of. Right. And Democrats are socialists, and they use Nicaragua as their primary socialist example. Nicaragua is a repressive military dictatorship. Right. It's an illegitimate government. It's not socialism.
Right.
Oh, Venezuela, not Nicaragua, Venezuela.
Yeah, I knew what you were talking about.
Venezuela is a petrol state. And the problem in Venezuela was that instead of charging taxes from the people, they got all of their money from petroleum. And when the price of oil fell and dropped out, the government had no more money, and they had no way to tax the people because they hadn't been taxing the people. People weren't used to getting taxed. And so now they have no money to provide all the social services that they had been promising. And social services are great to promise when you have free money from the petrol companies. But when you don't have the petrol companies, it's no longer free money. And that's the difference. Democrats have never advocated for free money, for free giveaways. Democrats have said, pay your taxes, Mr. President, pay your taxes, and then use those tax dollars to allocate them towards social services. But you have to pay the taxes first. So
but Jaime, how long has Venezuela been a failed state? It's been a while now. It's been a few years.
In 2008 and 2006, when the bottom fell out of oil, it started in 2010 is when it really got bad. You know, the type of oil that is manufactured in Venezuela also is a dirtier, heavier kind of crude that takes a lot more to manufacture, and so it's even tougher to sell on the world market than Texas crude, for example. And so, anyway, I don't want to take up the time. Carolyn, I want you to talk.
So let me reroute us here. Remember that part of the reason that we have these amazing Democratic candidates with us every night that we have one of these forums is so that we can ask you to vote for them, to volunteer for them, and also to donate at least $20.20 in honor of 2020 being the most absolutely important and imperative election of our lifetime. And clearly, Dr. Salter here understands the needs of the rural community that she is trying to represent. And so I urge you all, even if you don't live in her district, please go to her website, which is scrolling across the bottom of the screen, and sign up for a shift or two. Help her do some lit drops. Go to these forums, go to these candidate events. Make sure that you are giving some of your time, because that your voice is what is need to be heard by these other voters that have not yet committed to who they're going to vote for in your district. So please do that. Now, Carolyn, I'd like to move on, if you don't mind that I call you Carolyn and not Dr. Salter.
Absolutely. I was going to say that earlier.
I just, we're women, and you have worked very hard to become an MD, and I want to respect that. But at the same time, it's a little more informal and nice if I can call you Carolyn.
I mean, I told you that even before we went on. I was surprised when you did it to begin with, but
well,
go ahead.
As a lady, it's just a respect thing. So, but now that we've had that, so Carolyn, just kind of tagging on to what you were saying about oil and all of these things. When do you think that we should have conversations about what and when to have regulations or to cut regulations on anything?
Well, I have this belief that unfettered, unregulated capitalism's natural evolution is to organized crime. And I think we saw that in 2008 with the deregulation of the banking markets and the fallout from that, from the swap, the mortgage swaps. And that was devastating to the entire country. And what happened was the very wealthy got bailed out, and everybody else who wasn't wealthy didn't get bailed out. And they were the ones who really suffered. And it just didn't seem like an equitable solution to me, but that's one of our big problems, is inequality. And things just aren't equitable. In so many ways, it's hard to even count them all. But if you don't have regulation, then the tendency, corporations just aren't, and markets just aren't going to regulate themselves. I remember Alan Greenspan said he was really surprised about that when we had that the software bubble pop at the end of the 90s. He thought the markets would just regulate themselves somehow. Well, they don't do that. And unfortunately, the people who have the money often get to write the rules. And the Republicans even have a scheme where they have legislation that they write these model bills for that deregulate everything. And then they send them to all the state houses, and then they send them to Congress.
Alex.
So I've forgotten what that's called, but it's, yeah. And so, that's we have to regulate, but I'm in medicine, you know, and I can tell you that sometimes you can overregulate things, and when bureaucracies have the opportunity to regulate more, that is their tendency, because they want to plug every hole instead of asking people to act morally and ethically, which most doctors, the vast majority, will do. But I like to, it's not really a joke, but I like to say a small medical practice is only slightly less regulated than a nuclear reactor. So, I mean, we have so many acronyms that regulate us, it's not even funny. And it costs a lot of money to do that. And our pricing is stagnant. So if you're talking about rural healthcare in primary care, you're talking about an industry that is struggling. And that's a big problem across all of America. And it's also a problem in the inner cities and the poor neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. So did I answer your question? Or did I?
That's exactly what I was. That's something we can see
the proof in that with all the county hospitals that are closing around the state of Texas. I mean, so you're correct. Let me switch gears a little bit. The time is flying by pretty fast, actually. So let me switch gears a little bit.
Ask your questions, please, in the comments. Ask your questions so we can get some great audience questions to Dr. Salter here at 8:00.
So you come from deep East Texas and a particularly religious type community. And religion, I'm sure, has played a role in your upbringing. How do we as Democrats talk about religion when we're talking about politics?
Well, I think that the Democratic platform reflects, you know, traditional Christian values. So I don't see any problem with it. I mean, I grew up in the Church of Christ, and my husband's an Episcopalian. One of my best friends is a Church of Christ minister, and he supports me. Now, there are things that we differ on, but I think lying, cheating, stealing, you know, those are things you go to hell for, and there's plenty of Republicans doing that. So, and I think, you know, making sure that we take care of our fellow human beings. You know, we follow the golden rule. We love God. We follow the golden rule, and we try to eliminate suffering in the lives of other people in any way we can. And we act from an attitude of abundance, not what's mine is mine and what's yours is mine, like the Republicans tend to do, I think. But you know, we shouldn't be operating out of selfishness, and that is the way I see a lot of Republican platform positions operating out of. You know, when they say let's deregulate, for example, well, that puts profit in somebody's pocket, but it causes harm to people on down the line, and they have to pay for the consequences, whether it's their health care bill or whether it's their trash bill or whether it's the fact that they don't get their roads fixed because all the money went to a big corporate entity to bring them into town. It doesn't really matter. I mean, the results are myriad. If you're not taking care of your fellow person, your neighbor, your friend, you know, your family, as well as yourself, then you're not really being a Christian. And I don't see a lot of Republicans doing that. I see them motivated more by hate and greed than especially the ones at the national level who are in office. It always seems to be motivation. The motivation is greed, and what comes out of their mouth is hateful. So I'm proud to be a Democrat and a Christian, and I don't see any conflict between the two whatsoever. In fact, I would have trouble being a Republican, at least a conservative Republican. Now I'm a fiscal conservative, but
so now, well, in that same vein, then we need to have the conversation about the fact that we were founded on freedom from religion, not just freedom of religion, which then begs the question, are we electing leaders who will legislate or make laws that are based on the goodwill and the moralistic center for all people, regardless of faith or no faith? You know, because we want to make sure that we're not a Christian necessarily. We are not we're not founded to be a Christian nation. We were founded to be a nation where you could pray in whatever way that you hope. So I would like to know if that is something that you also, I don't want someone's Christian ideals to harm my siblings in the LGBTQIA community, where we have so much disparity, where we're not feeding the homeless, which is a Christian ideal, where we're not clothing. And so are you committed to that ideal as well, I suppose, is my question.
Well, if I understood your question correctly, was how faith affected me and whether or not I was and how I see myself as a Democrat. But I don't see any conflict with honoring other religions, however they see themselves. That isn't that number one in our Constitution or something? So I mean, it is. You're not supposed. The government is not supposed to be influenced by religion, and vice versa.
Right.
But now a lot of the people, the evangelical Christians that support Trump, I mean, in their literature, they are supporting Trump because he wants to establish, or they believe he wants to establish, a white Christian nation. That is not a goal that I agree with at all. I think we need to have a secular country where everyone is free to worship or not worship at all. It doesn't impact me what somebody else does.
Just saying the golden rule, have always said that's really the overarching ideal for all people, is just do unto others as you would want have done unto you. That's it.
Right. And that's why I tried to say at the very, very beginning. I must not have conveyed it very well, but I agree with you entirely. That's absolutely right.
So, switching gears a little bit again, your district is one of these districts that Ted Cruz came to a lot 2 years ago when he was running for re-election. Like in Athens, Texas, for example, he picked up some amazing 20,000 votes in little old Athens. And if you know anything about Athens, you don't even think there's 5,000 people there. And so to get 20,000 votes out of nothing, I mean, he was really squeezing blood out of a rock there. But that's where the Republican votes keep coming from, are these little rural pockets that Democrats ignore over and over. Beto kind of ignored it, and not to speak ill of Beto
That's
at
right.
all.
Well, they all come.
Yeah, the Republicans all come. So
stuttering on my internet connection, so I'm missing sometimes snippets of what you say. I'm sorry, but Beto and Cornyn, not Beto and Cornyn, Cornyn and Cruz come through at least 2 or 3 times a year to almost every county in East Texas, and and Beto came through once in Anderson County. He was over in Smith County 2 or 3 times, maybe a couple of times in Cherokee County. But that's the big mistake I'm saying these statewide candidates are making. They're not coming through, and reliably and meeting people and showing, because that's, they don't think you care if they don't see you there.
That's right.
Yeah, and Smith County is outside of your district, but it's the big city there is Tyler. And just so that y'all can understand how big the Republican presence is, the city of Tyler voted more Republicans in that one city than the combined total of Democratic votes in the entire Congressional District 1 2 years ago. So that one city overwhelmed the entire Congressional District. So it was right for Beto to go many times, and it would be right for Democrats to go visit there, but they also need to visit your district more. And it's one of the reasons we wanted to highlight your district in our series, because we want people to recognize your district exists.
Right.
Well, that's one of the reasons why we're having this forum in Van Zandt County. It's a really, really red county, but we want to have a forum there. We want people to know that it's not, they have to account to everybody, and they need to listen to everybody. And we're going to give them that opportunity. If they don't choose to take it, fine. But we need to try to reach out everywhere.
Absolutely. My family is from East Texas, from Beaumont area. So I am very aware of that feeling of, I don't feel seen when I would talk to Democrats that would live there. I don't feel seen. Nobody comes here to visit us. Nobody thinks that we're ever going to vote in any way like the Democrats would want. But then they realize the Democrats are pro-union, which oftentimes they belong to because they work in some industry where there is a union that has protected them and their families. These are important conversations and topics to talk about with your constituents that are out in East Texas. And I really appreciate that we're having this conversation. What do you think is more important, especially right now, American jobs or free trade?
Well, I think we can have both. So I think one of the things that it's been clear that we've outsourced way too much. For example, our drug manufacturing has been way too much outsourced. And this COVID-19 pandemic has made that painfully clear. The other thing is that it provides a level of national, it's a threat to the United States when we don't have access to the complete manufacturing source stream for drugs. Because if we can't get them without asking China for the components, then we're in trouble. And so far, a lot of manufacturing, they moved a lot from Puerto Rico out of the United States. And that's a real problem for us because we can't secure our medication stream. So that means if anything happens, we have to repair our weapons.
You're saying that we have manufacturing of drugs in Puerto Rico?
We did.
That's interesting. The reason I bring that up is because I know that the governor of Puerto Rico today has done a video talking about support Trump because they want statehood. But yeah. But it does seem like that would be a talking point Democrats could hit on, that we want to bring manufacturing back to your island where it is such an important part of our economy as the mainland and your economy as your own state. That would also give them the ability to become a state, I would think, like a more, more incentive to fight for their statehood. That is something I just didn't know. And you've just totally taught me something new. And I'm going to use that talking point forever now. Thank you, Dr. Salter. Jaime, we're getting close to the 8:00 hour. So,
and I know that we're getting some good questions in from the audience, but I want to keep on some of this for a second before we get to audience questions. Carolyn, your congressional district is bigger than many states in the United States, and I hear and I'm all 100% there for AOC and some of these more progressive Democrats who are in office. But when they talk about fundraising and how you have to be independent and not get money from PACs and all that because it's so easy, they walk their congressional district. I mean, they literally wore out tennis shoes because they could walk their entire congressional district. Mm-hmm. If you have to go to a meeting, you might literally spend $100 in gas money to get to that meeting, and there might be 20 people at that meeting. Mm-hmm. So tell us what it's like to be a congressional candidate in a district that's 4 or 5 hours wide and 2 or 3 hours north to south. I mean,
these are weird times, and you really, I can go. It's about 120 miles long, a little bit more. So it takes me at most 2.5 hours to get across it. It doesn't cost $100 by any stretch of the imagination. But this has been COVID-19, so most of the campaigning I've done has been by phone and by Zoom. And I did a little bit at the beginning. I went to all the clubs, like your groups that are here tonight. They're the same kind of groups over in Dallas, and one in particular called the Feds has been great at mobilizing volunteers to put up literature, and that is what really helped turn Dallas blue and get the vote out. And I know you know about them, Jaime. But so it hasn't been that hard for me because I had planned on Zooming on Facebook Live while I was in my car and doing things like that. But I ended up just staying home and calling and doing these COVID-19 and issue updates. I used to do COVID-19 updates every day during the first couple of weeks of the COVID-19 outbreak. And I've continued that for months. Now it's just once a week at 1:30 on Monday on my Congressional Facebook page. But that's how I've done it, is reach out that way. And people have learned about me, and they've also been really, really interested because the COVID-19 outbreak has been so terribly, terribly, terribly mishandled.
Absolutely.
Carly, ask her about her special talent that she was going to show us tonight.
So for those of you who have not seen her COVID fancy live streams that she does answering all your questions, and I must say that we need more teachers and more physicians in office, more scientists, all the people that actually believe facts. But not only does she tell you the facts about COVID, she also has a really cool life hack video regarding masks. So I would love it if you would show our audience a little bit of that.
Well, the most important thing is to know that when you have a mask like this, that it has wire in the top and you fit it to your nose, and then just hold on to these to put them on your ears. And if the mask doesn't fit quite right, you can flip it and put little like this. And well, now it's not doing it right, but
of course.
So you do like this, and then do like this. And then it sort of pinches right here, and it fits to your face better. And then you need to put your glasses here. And if it's uncomfortable, even with that, and your things are long enough, you can put a paper clip and hold them together, and fit it behind your head like that with a paper clip, as if you put them on each one of these little strips of elastic. So those are the two most important ones. But to keep your glasses from fogging up, you put them on the bridge, on the paper or the cloth, instead of inside your mask.
You hear that, folks, that wear glasses, and I know my husband does. And I know so many Democrats are wearing glasses, and so many of us will probably have to wear glasses soon. That's talking about me. So make sure to use her life hacks, and make sure to go to her website and her Facebook page and see all of her past videos so you can get more information about the COVID pandemic from her perspective. It is incredibly important to try to elect a physician to our Texas Congress. We need science, we need facts, we need people who read, we need people who understand the issues that are actually happening and believe it and be honest about it. And Dr. Salter, I see that from you in spades. It's just been such an enlightening conversation for me. I really appreciate it. We do have some great questions coming in from the audience. I want to ask Jaime if he'll start.
I think we're to that point now. Let's ask some questions from the audience. I reserve the right for Carly and I to jump in with some of our thoughts too, because you spurred some interesting discussions. But the first question from the audience is about criminal justice reform, and they want to know what do you think? What would be the first thing you could change, or that needs to be changed if you get elected to Congress? What would your priorities be when it comes to criminal justice reform?
Well, yeah, that is not one of my strong suits. I'm not an attorney, but we certainly need to address the fact that we do have institutional racism in many of our criminal justice institutions. And one of the things that I think we need to look at is training police officers better and not expecting them to do every job. I don't know if you know how many hours of training police officers get, but I dealt with the police force when I was mayor, and they get 8 weeks of training, and then they're with a rookie trainer for about a year. So 8 weeks of training is really not that much with a deadly weapon. And a lot of them only have, it's only 8 weeks, right? So you can't really expect them to be a marriage counselor and a dog catcher and a SWAT team member and break up an armed robbery and do traffic cop work and do all those things and deal with mental health interventions. So I think we need to have much more training for police officers. We need to pay them better, and we need to actually work on the causes of crime in some of our areas, which is lack of opportunity, lack of education, bad food, lack of medical care, lack of adequate housing, lack of adequate recreational facilities, lack of child care. So, I mean, there's just so many things that cause people to, act out in any way. We have a huge mental health problem and lack of mental health facilities and access in this country, and a lot of the calls that police officers go to are due to mental health issues. Even domestic violence calls, that's a mental health issue. Sometimes it's a substance abuse issue, and we don't have enough substance abuse facilities either. If it's alcohol or drugs, all these issues are interrelated. And for me to just go, oh, I got a simple answer here, let's be like Medicare for all, that's it. We can, that's just not going to happen. It's a complex problem that's a result of over a century of discrimination and at every level for numerous people. And we're not going to fix it overnight. We have to really understand the problem, and we have to understand how to help people. And and the other really big thing, we need to talk to them while we're doing it. Part of the solution, and understand that the policies that are implemented will only work if they accept them, they embrace them, and they help them and they help them, be implemented. Right. But they have to be funded. There has to be adequate training, and everybody has to be on board, because all these issues are local now. They're not, your police officers live in your community, and we don't have the kinds of problems in Palestine that they do other places.
Right.
But there's some issues with the force and often with the unions where they protect officers at all costs. Mm-hmm. And that's not what unions should be doing. They should be selecting for the best behavior and the best training. And there are some people that are simply not suited to do police work, and they need to be ferreted out early on. They don't need.
I think we found a passion point for her. They don't
need to be reprimanded 18 times before they kill somebody.
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
Let's get to the next audience question.
So our next question is right up your wheelhouse. Our federal government's response to the COVID pandemic has been spotty at best. What can the federal government do to prepare us better for, and I really hate to say these words, but for the next pandemic?
Well, there's going to be another pandemic. There always is. I mean, we had a pandemic 10 years ago. I mean, when Trump said, "Who'd have thought we have a pandemic?" I go, "Well, everybody." I mean, who doesn't think you're going to not have a pandemic? Since 2000, we had SARS and MERS and swine flu and Zika and Ebola, and then COVID-19. And I'm sure there were a few little regional epidemics that were a problem too. And with climate change, we're fixing to have a whole bunch more. So if we don't do it soon, I mean, we're going to go back to having malaria in the southern United States. We already have equine encephalitis. It'll be a lot worse. I did a climate talk about this. So if you want to know what I think, you should go look at that. But there was a plan. They just threw it out the window, and they didn't look at it. They didn't crack it. And remember, do you know who's in charge of the White House COVID planning? Mike Pence. He's supposed to know you're supposed to have plexiglass.
And he doesn't want to have it.
He doesn't want to have it. Did he not read the memo?
And now his press secretary and her husband, she just recovered from COVID, and Stephen Miller tested positive today. So not putting up a plexi, it's just defies imagination. It just
there's probably 3 or 4 people in the White House that have been running around who were asymptomatic carriers, but didn't quite have enough viral load to test positive, but they had just enough to spread it. So and that's why they needed to be masked up and socially distancing inside the White House.
I don't even heard that.
It's a contagious disease.
I don't think I've even heard that in the media, that you can have a small viral load, be asymptomatic, and yet still test negative and transmit the virus.
Yeah, there's about 2 days of asymptomatic transmission, and you may not test positive. There's a significant false positive and false negative rate with these tests. So we've seen it in our office. We do COVID-19 testing. We do COVID-19 testing for return to work. We do it on our employees. So we had an issue last week with somebody that had a positive COVID-19 test. There was an antigen positive test, but negative PCR. So she got sent home. We had another person, test positive and got sent home for 10 days after the end of fever and symptoms. So, but she didn't have any symptoms, and she didn't test positive before that. So we know that happens. We know it happens.
Carolyn, quash something for us right now. Tell us what's the difference between COVID and the flu.
Well, they're both RNA viruses, but one's an influenza virus, and we have a vaccine for that, and we have Tamiflu for that, and the other one is a coronavirus. It's there are 7 different coronaviruses, I believe, and this is related to the SARS coronavirus. That's why it's SARS-CoV-19, but it's SARS-CoV-2. And I don't know why we call it Corona 19, but I've forgotten. But we don't have a vaccine to them. They cause the common cold. Humans get 4 of them in ordinary circumstances. So this is a 5th. So and it can it can be deadly. It's highly contagious. It's mutated a little bit, but not as much as the flu does. We have to change the influenza vaccine every year because influenza mutates. And the symptoms are very similar. But the one thing that's different between the two is you don't lose your sense of smell with the flu, and you may with coronavirus.
But the president says that the flu is deadlier, that 100,000 people die a year with the flu. Is any of that?
I mean, he's either willfully ignorant or he's stupid. So I don't know which one it is. But it's killed. The coronavirus so far has killed as many people as the flu has in the last 5 seasons put together.
That's a great topic.
Usually it's 30 to 60,000 people die from flu, but we've got a vaccine. And
right.
Usually though we only get about 50% of people to take it.
Wow.
That's stunning. That's stunning. And a lot of people don't take the vaccine because they can't afford it. They don't have the time to take off work to go.
That's not my experience. Most people's insurance will cover it, especially if they're the ones who need to take it the most,
which we've already
Medicare age. And Medicare pays for the flu vaccine. It pays for the most potent flu vaccine. And they don't want to take it. I've never gotten the flu, or every time I get it, it makes me feel sick. Yada, 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 yada. They need to take it. It doesn't give them the flu. It can't. But sometimes people can already have the flu and they don't time it right, and they don't know. They're in the incubation period. And so then they mistake getting the influenza from the vaccine for having it before the vaccine could take effect.
See,
or they just have a viral illness and they don't really have the.
That is certainly a thing that
because I'll go, how many go to? We have the flu. I don't know what you have, but it wasn't the flu, so whatever. I've had the flu. I was sick for 3 weeks, so that wasn't the flu. Whatever you say.
Right. We hear it a lot from, or I do at least, from people that don't want to take vaccines. They'll say, well, it makes me sick. I've taken it once and it made me sick, and I was so sick, I just never will take it again. And then some become anti-vaxxers and all of that. Now we have no trust in our federal government. So a lot of people are struggling to believe whether this new vaccine that Trump keeps pushing or saying that is coming is going to be a viable vaccine, because we have so much distrust in what this administration and their enablers continue to tell us. So it's again, this is why we need to elect Dr. Carolyn Salter to Texas 05, because we need people that understand science, that listen to the experts, that will tell you the truth about these vaccines that are going to save our economy and save our lives. Make sure that you donate $20.20. Give 2 hours. You know what? Give 5 hours of your time for Texas 05. 5 hours. So whether that's 5 hours of lit drop, 5 hours of phone calls, 5 hours of texting if they have texting, whatever it is, 5 hours of walking around your own neighborhood, telling your neighbors to vote for Dr. Salter. Please do this. We need more science in our federal government, and she is certainly a start.
And frankly, audience, a lot of you are, if you're watching a show like this, you're a nerd like we are. And you're probably doing a lot already for Democrats in Texas. I'm telling you, focus on a race like Dr. Salter's. This is a winnable race. It has always been a winnable race. I've sat down and crunched the numbers for many years at this point. It's a race that gets ignored by Democrats. And by Democrats, I mean the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. Yes, I'm calling them out. The DCCC ignores races like this one because they're not sexy races in the big city. They're not the kind of races that are going to attract $5 and $6 and $7 million to the campaign. And so there's no money in it for a lot of players to come and work the races, but the votes are there. Carolyn mentioned that 50% of the population is in East Dallas County, and the other 50% is in the rural areas. That gives you the idea. There is an even split of Democrats and Republicans. It's just that the Democrats have been demoralized and told that they can't win a district like this. The Republicans have been energized. And of course, when Ted Cruz comes 10 times in the last 100 days before the election in 2018 to Athens, that energizes the base for sure.
And we know that 6,000 voters came with their voter registrations in Dallas County yesterday, which was the deadline to register to vote. And hopefully these are all great Democratic voters that are going to vote. If Carolyn is on their ballot, it's just so important. And oftentimes we ignore these races, and what ends up happening is this little spreading of misinformation because our people are not going there to change the narrative, to show that we absolutely understand these rural issues. We absolutely are gun owners and readers. We absolutely do believe in, going mudding, but also understanding what science is. And, all of these things that are so very, very Texan, we end up ignoring because we don't think we can win there. But if we would just put in the legwork, and this is where you guys come in, y'all need to commit that 5 hours, make those phone calls, make those texts, because this is a winnable race. This is a winnable district. This is not every district in all of Texas is winnable by Democrats. We just have to vote. We are not a Republican state. We are a Democratic state that doesn't vote enough. So make sure that you go to Dr. Salter's every social channel, follow her, make sure that you donate your time, make sure you donate that $20.20. This is so imperative and so important to all of us. And as Dr. Salter rightfully told us earlier, we here in Houston benefit from her district because water from there comes here. So many of our citizens that live in our area are getting their drinking water from her area. If you want to talk a little bit more about that, Dr. Salter.
Well, I mean, there's that awful joke that says when Dallas flushes, Houston drinks it, but it does come down the Trinity River for 300 miles, and it does get clean first. But you know, that's but you do. Well, that's one of the reasons why we need clean ag, is because we don't want that stuff getting to the Trinity River so that you guys drink it down there in Houston. And you know, we're all part of East Texas. We got to help each other. We're neighbors. And Carly, you just said it, girl. I mean, I couldn't have said it better. Thank you so much for everything you said. You were spot on. And Jaime, Jaime knows. You know, he really did look at the numbers for my district. Even 2 years ago, it was winnable. But it's grown so much since then. Things have even changed in 2 years, Jaime. You know, we've had a lot of new people. Californians are moving into Dallas and Kaufman County. And not all of them are Republicans. You know, some of them are Democrats. And I really think that we can get them out to vote for us. Absolutely. You know, I've got mailing programs going on. You know, I have 6 mailers going out to persuadable voters. I've been out there as much as I possibly could. My COVID-19 talks have gone everywhere, and people do listen to them.
Yeah, and you know what's funny,
I've tried to be as honest.
What's funny is that the population of the rural areas of your district are a lot of farmers and ranchers who ought to care about climate change and who ought to care about agriculture and the way that we treat the planet. Mm-hmm. You know, you touched on it a little while ago that you would like to get us back into the Paris Climate Accords. Tell one of the actually questions that just to get back to audience questions, the audience was just asking now is talking about, you know, the more weather extreme events that are happening and how do we need to start dealing with that? And how do we talk to our own people who ought to care about the planet?
Well, I mean, if it's not clear that we ought to care about the planet in the middle of a mass extinction, and it seems like the whole world's on fire. Australia burned up, 1 billion animals died. You know, what is it, a gigafire now in California? You know, the Midwest has been wiped out by flooding and extreme weather events. You can't count on crops anymore. You know, we've been a little insulated from it here in Texas. So we haven't quite, I mean, we had a bad drought about 10 years ago, but the last few years, it hasn't been that bad here. But that doesn't mean weather is not climate. The Arctic is melting, the Antarctic is melting, the Greenland ice shelf is melting. You know, if all the ice in the whole world melts, you know where the Gulf of Mexico is going to be? It's going to be around. It's going to be south of Huntsville somewhere. I mean, it's going to almost come up to Huntsville. So Houston's going to be gone. You guys are going to have to get boats if you want to live there. So, you know, now they say it's 100 years away, but, you know, a lot of these climate scientists have really been wrong. Things are changing.
Yeah, and anytime anybody says it's a 100-year event, we've had 500-year floods in Houston in the last decade alone. So I don't want to hear like all of these people that are like, oh, it's fine. It's you'll be dead by the time that happens, which is really the implication for voters, right? You're going to be dead. You won't be here, but your children will be here. Your grandchildren will be here. And even if you have none of those things, humanity is at stake. That's it. Humanity and our Mother Earth are all at stake here.
Well, you know, a lot of the mass migration from Central America is climate change.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just gang warfare. They can't grow food. They're hungry. It's the same thing that's true in Europe with the African migration, the Middle Eastern migration. A lot of the wars and famine and disease, they're all climate related. You know, they're also population related, but they're also climate related. So, I mean, we just got a whole ton of things we have to deal with simultaneously.
I've never been more excited for a congressional race that people think that is not winnable than I am about this young lady, Dr. Carolyn Salter. You need to make sure that she gets elected. And that all it takes is getting voters to vote. And early voting starts on Monday. Election day is November 3rd. Jaime, if you'll ask her, we have time for a couple more audience.
So another audience question. Would you support a Tennessee Valley Authority type of project that would bring Wi-Fi to the rural areas? And I mean, you've got enough rural areas.
I lost half of that question. Can you repeat it?
Bring Wi-Fi to the rural areas in your district. I mean, is this?
Well, we need broadband here. In order to get broadband, you have to bring fiber, and then the solution to the last mile is going to be different for every part of the community. So I don't have a hard and fast, but we need that. I think it's HR 2 that's sitting on Mitch McConnell's desk that has, I think it's $200 billion to build out broadband in rural areas in it. It's a $1.5 trillion bill. It's sitting in the Senate on Mitch McConnell's desk. So if we could get those sorts of resources to build out broadband, fiber backbones, then we could figure out the solutions at a local level if we have the fiber backbones laid along the major arteries in our communities.
And that would help so many families that are having to have schooling from home right now or doing telemedicine where they can stay home and stay safe. It's such an important thing. We are a technological society now. We have grown by leaps and bounds in the last 20 years since we've really come into the internet age, and we cannot leave our rural communities behind. And Texas, being as big as we are, we have so many rural communities, but we're just ignoring them because the majority of the money comes from our urban spaces. And that is actually a misnomer. That's not true. We need to take care of every community and make sure they all have as much access as we do here in whatever major city we're living in. Jaime.
Yeah, Carolyn, so we're almost out of time here, and I promised you earlier that I was going to give you a moment to talk about your district. Let me do this instead, since we only have about 4 minutes left, and we wanted to give you a minute to close anyway. Just why don't you spend a minute just now, talk to us about your campaign. What can we do to get a hold of you? How can we help you? What do you need from us? Talk to us about that, and then I'll give you another minute to talk about another topic right away. So tell us what we can do for you. And we're going to put you up on the screen, so it's just you talking for a second here. Just talk to us about your campaign. How can we help you? Let's see.
Well, most of the people watching this live in Houston and they can't vote for me. They can donate to my campaign. They can volunteer on my website, which is this way right there, Salter for Congress @.com. Please volunteer. I'm going to have text banking for Get Out the Vote. We have call banks, which also help the Democratic Party. I know Beto's done some. But we're trying to help the Democratic Party improve the data in the rural areas in my district, and that outreach helps us know who's there and who we can reach and who we can ask to vote. So if you can volunteer, donate, text bank, those are the most important things right now for me to do. And you can access all those things on my website, the volunteer link. And my campaign coordinator, Nate, will get back to you about that. But thank you all for watching me tonight and listen and being, I know it's late and you're tired and I'm kind of chatty, but I do try to tell you what I really think. What I say comes from the heart. And I want to help my constituents to work together with all the Texas delegation to bring back progress to Texas and especially my district and my rural communities.
Dr. Salter, thank you so much for the time this evening. It has been beyond anything I can express to you, really, and appropriate words without a lot of cussing. But I will say that we advertise specifically and in your district for this event. So hopefully we'll have a lot more viewers coming either that are still watching with us now or after the fact. But again, salterforcongress.com, SALTER. Make sure that you donate $20.20. Give 5 hours of your time. Contact 5 friends or neighbors or friends or family that you may think need that little push to vote. Contact those people. Tell them.
In my district. Yeah.
In Congress.
So Carolyn, we have just a little bit of time. Let me ask you something a little bit different. I'm going to put you on the spot for a second, but we want to get to know you a little bit better. You're not one of the more well-known candidates statewide right now. And so give us just a little anecdote, a little story that will help us to know you better. Just tell us something about yourself or something that's happened that might give us a sense of who you are as a person.
You're freezing. Geez, that's hard.
I know, I put you on the spot.
Well,
and we're
am I cutting out now?
Go.
Sorry, I have terrible internet. What can I say? I'm in rural East Texas. But when I met you, I believe what you said about trying to build on success, and what Mike Collier said. You can't expect to win overnight. You have to invest. And I saw you and Dan Woods needed help, 2 years ago when Dan was running for the office I'm running for. And so I opened my home and put on a fundraiser for Dan and helped you and he begin his campaign in the very early days. So that's just who I am. I'll take a chance. I want to leave everything on the field. Our democracy, our nation, and our world are on the line right now. We're walking on the edge of a knife. And I'm going to do everything I can, use my personal resources, my reputation, the money that I've accumulated in my life to try and help save the country, the nation, the home, the world that I love. And I think that's it.
I'll tell you, I mean, we're out of time. We're completely out of time at this point, but I'll tell you, it's true. We got to her home, and the first thing, besides having the most wonderful spread and the most beautiful old home that she's restored there in Palestine, she had checks for us. So she puts her money where her mouth is. She max donated, and her husband max donated that very night. Wonderful to have donors and sponsors and activists like you, and especially who end up running. So
vote for a woman that sees a need and fills it.
Well, thanks for having me, you guys.
Clearly,
I think we have to leave it at that. We're already over time.
Join us next Sunday at same bat time, same bat channel. This coming Sunday, we'll be talking to Mike Collier from the Joe Biden campaign about all the opportunities and exciting things that we're doing right before early vote starts.
And next week is early voting. So next week is in-person early voting in Texas. So get out there and vote.
It actually starts on Tuesday on the 13th.
That's right.
Monday's Columbus Day.
That's right.
Okay, bye everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Bye. Thank you.